Now, I think it's pretty safe to say that Snow White 2024 by Disney is by far going to be the biggest box office failure among Disney throughout all of their other films that have been adapted into live action from their animated counterparts. And not just that, I really do feel it's going to be the worst performing ever by Disney in general. There's no doubt about this for several reasons out there that we have gone over several times. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we know that she has been going on endless reactions to, of course, everything that has been happening to her based on studios that have been blacklisting and firing her from many major roles in Hollywood, her reaction against Disney by banishing her from the world premiere of Snow White 2024 so far. But there's a lot of things happening in between. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you out there have heard about the Daily Wire that is now and has been creating their own version of Snow White, titled Snow White and the Evil Queen, starring Brett Cooper. And, well, let's just say that Rachel Zegler is not having a good time with this ongoing development, and this has actually been a thing that has been ongoing for a couple of weeks now between the whole drama and fiasco with Disney, and of course Rachel Zegler and other aspects out there within Hollywood. Now, specifically, what's really revealing about all of this has a lot to do with the Daily Wire's approach to their iteration, or version, whatever have you, of Snow White that stars a more and a very accurate version of how Snow White should have been done. We know that they're going to accurately portray the evil queen, the 7 dwarfs in this film. They're going all out with this movie to really troll and combat against Disney. But let's get into this further. Now, with actress Rachel Zegler already gearing up to make more direct and serious statements about her disgust with the Snow White backlash, one major development has to do with her terrible response against the Daily Wire's version of Snow White, starring Brett Cooper, and created by the Daily Wire, that will also be dropping next year in an attempt to compete against Disney's Snow White. Now, currently, Zegler and her team, including her agent and manager, are already preparing a massive statement against the Daily Wire about her disgust with the backlash against race swapping and that concept that even Disney has reportedly given Zegler permission after heavily requesting to defend the concept of race swapping in her upcoming regular interviews to take place after the SAG strike comes to a close. Now, though she is still banished from the world premiere, one other crucial update to all of this is that Zegler recently convinced Disney to allow her to make a series of social media posts on Twitter and even YouTube going against the Daily Wire and Brett Cooper and their take on Snow White. This is something that Disney approved, as they see the Daily Wire's Snow White as a threat and a mockery to them, and a threat to their business. Zegler is said to already have a massive grudge against Brett Cooper's Snow White, as the drama has been so large behind the scenes at Disney, it has been rattling throughout all over the studio. Now, let me just stop here about one major element about this before I move on to the big piece of this development, is that we know that Rachel Zegler is someone that cannot take criticism very well, especially in this scenario where you have the Daily Wire that is deliberately mocking and trolling, essentially, Disney's version of Snow White, which, by the way, features Rachel Zegler, and this is something that's creating a turn of events, right? Now, next year, you're going to have this headbutting. You're going to have Snow White and the Evil Queen by the Daily Wire going up against just Snow White by Disney. And you know what? I think it's going to be a very interesting, little event, so to speak, between these two versions of Snow White. Now, we're not quite sure exactly when the Daily Wire plans to release this version of the movie. It's probably not coming out in March. It's probably not even going to be coming out in April. So this looks like it's more geared toward the summer of next year, which, you know what, I think is perfect timing to kind of just let the backlash of Snow White settle, let that vanish and quietly go away, and then bring the Daily Wire's version of it into the spotlight. So we know that Zegler and her team are not taking this well, but matters get even worse. We're going to be diving into exactly how she's also responding to the Daily Wire really making this iteration of Snow White by Brett Cooper. Now, Brett Cooper, by the way, I think is great casting. She is a very great speaker on social media, and I think that she deserved to be a part of this role. She kind of has that Lily Collins-esque look in the trailer and in that photo art, and I think that was a great decision by them. But moving onwards here, this is where things get even more serious. Now, Zegler is also said to be launching a campaign by wearing t-shirts that will defend her race-swapped version of Snow White to go against the Daily Wire's Snow White. And Disney executives are also planning to take action against the Daily Wire's version of Snow White, which is an ongoing development right now that will be touched on later. The situation is getting quite severe behind the scenes for Zegler and her team, and the fact that Disney approved Zegler to talk against the Daily Wire's version of this movie is living proof that they are using the actress no more than a direct voice with a face. The t-shirts that are planned by Zegler and her team are also said to have been approved by Disney. This comes at no surprise since Disney is holding a meeting with Comedy Central over the upcoming South Park episode that they are very unhappy about currently on mocking race swapping and gender swapping. Snow White and the Evil Queen by the Daily Wire is also planned to honor the source material, and they are begging for everyone to watch this film instead of Disney's atrocity. And you know what, guys? I say let's honor the Daily Wire's take on Snow White. Snow White and the Evil Queen, it's coming out next year, most likely, like I said before, a couple of months after Disney's Snow White. You know, they're most likely gonna let the backlash settle and continue on further. Now, the fact that Zegler and her team are launching this desperate, movement by creating t-shirts and merchandise to really defend their race-swapped version of the character, and especially they are doing this as a response and as a reaction to what the Daily Wire is doing with Snow White, and specifically really kind of course-correcting the source material and saving it from Disney's mess. Now, we know that Disney right now, they're very unhappy about this, alright? There's been a lot of things happening behind closed doors. There's a lot of drama happening right now between the executives and them headbutting against the Daily Wire. It kind of reminds me of what happened with 24th Century Studios with Happily Ever After. Disney was very unhappy and very frustrated over what they did with that iteration of Snow White and how that was considered a sequel to the original 1937 film that was unapproved. So there's a lot of things going on here between the Daily Wire and Disney that we will be talking about throughout the remainder of this week. But about Rachel Zegler, this just goes to show you that she cannot take a shred of criticism or any kind of, response to what Disney has been doing with these famous characters that have been embedded in pop culture for decades. Yes, decades. Snow White has been within pop culture for a very long time, even before Disney. We gotta remember the original tales as well, right? The original Brothers Grimm, the original German tale, stuff like that. And we know that Rachel Zegler is going to be someone that's going to keep on going on endless rants once the SAG strike ends. It's not going to be good. It's going to be quite ugly for everybody. So, anyway, guys, drop a comment below. Fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.
From night to moon